KwaZulu-Natal liquor stalls will soon be able to trade on Sundays, which has been prohibited for years. This comes as the Gauteng government is seeking public opinion on doing the exact opposite, banning the sale of alcohol on Sundays. The change in KwaZulu-Natal has drawn criticism from some quarters, with some believing it could increase alcohol-related problems.
There's good news for weekend tipplers in KwaZulu-Natal. For the first time, they'll also be able to buy their booze from liquor stores for 5 hours on a Sunday. But there are some concerns about the KZN Liquor Licensing Act.
There is an increase over weekends of alcohol-related harm, including domestic violence and abuse and so on. It's related, of course, to people going out, to it being the weekend, and also, unfortunately, there is a pattern of binge drinking. Often comes to the fore over weekends as well.
The new legislation, which will be applicable in the next month or two, is about more than that though. There will be more stringent licensing conditions, including new applicants not being allowed to operate their businesses within 500 meters of a place of worship or a school.
The new act is now providing for more public participation, because in the local committees you've got community members and community policing forums, representatives from municipalities, SAPS and other such people that represent that particular community.
When the act comes into effect, all liquor traders will have to convert their existing licenses to comply with the new legislation. It will also be compulsory for traders to renew those licenses every year. And for the first time, that will only happen after the KwaZulu-Natal Liquor Authority is satisfied that they are compliant. Jason Thathier, Durban.
Adrian Buerta is director at the Industry Association for Responsible Alcohol Abuse, or rather use. Oh dear, too many Freudian slips here this evening, Adrian. Gauteng clearly wants to tighten the laws. KZN is relaxing them. In which direction do you believe we should be heading?
We don't believe that there's any simplistic solution to the problems of alcohol abuse. So one needs to really look at holistically how one can address it. The prohibition on Sunday training, we are absolutely convinced, will not have the desired effect in reducing alcohol-related harm, but will in fact have unintended negative consequences. We must remember in our country that the vast majority of alcohol beverages sold are in fact sold through illegal outlets. And these outlets operate any time of the day or night. So in other words, a prohibition on a Sunday will expand the illegal trade while certainly damaging the legal trade.
I mean, we've just heard an interesting insert, or watched an interesting insert, in which we heard someone say that it's clear the incidence of violence resulting from increased alcohol use over weekends, end up with people in hospital, more accidents than usual. Can't we just simply avoid the level of that by introducing laws that prohibit alcohol usage on Sundays at least?
Jan, my point is that it would be impossible to prohibit it because of the massive amount of illegal traders out there. So one has to really start looking at how best do we deal with the problem. I'm not saying the problem doesn't exist. It certainly does, and we as the industry are deeply concerned about it. But let's look at, for example, enforcing our current laws. Let's look at broader education. Let's look at targeted interventions that can address where we have the problems. And let's also look at parents taking responsibility, us all, those people who choose to drink, taking responsibility for our actions. If we look at this thing holistically, and most importantly, if we begin to really address the underlying causes of alcohol abuse in our country, which unfortunately is social deprivation. And as Vilanzima Vavi said 2 years ago in KZN, if you don't fix education and unemployment, those 70% of South Africans under the age of 30 who are unemployed will continue to feel hopeless. And what does hopelessness lead to? Unfortunately, in many instances, alcohol misuse.
Adrian, what you're talking about is indeed very relevant, and certainly it is a long-term project that government undertake. But in the short term, can measures like this not perhaps give us some sort of way of cutting down on interim usage?
Unfortunately not, because as I say, people, if for example Gauteng goes ahead and we have a total prohibition on alcohol consumption on a Sunday, it's not going to stop people from drinking. So what they'll either do is get it, as I say, from illegal outlets, which will operate all day on Sundays, or secondly, and this is a little dangerous, they will stock up dramatically on the Saturday, just in case they have guests on the Sunday, and when Sunday comes, there's a great possibility they'll consume it. So one has to look at other ways of addressing this issue. One has to really look at that behavior change. In other words, that those people who choose to drink can do so if they drink responsibly and in moderation, and that is where the whole focus should be.
Now, what would you say are your predictions for how this is going to turn out tomorrow?
Well, as was said in your insert, we've got quite a strange situation in South Africa right now. We've had Gauteng that's always allowed Sunday trading and now wants to prohibit it. We've had KZN that hasn't allowed Sunday trading and now is going to allow Sunday trading. And we've had the Cape, which has just changed its laws, which will change its hours of sale from the 1st of April. So it's a little confusing, I think, for everyone, and I think one really needs to try and get some sort of consistency. One also needs to take into account, besides the employment and the issues I've mentioned earlier about illegal and illegal trade, we must also take into account tourism. And clearly, KwaZulu-Natal, when tourists come to South Africa from Germany, from wherever, from the UK, they are used to being able to have a glass of wine with their meals on a Sunday. And, all of a sudden, Gauteng, which is really trying to encourage tourism, why will people actually stop over? So really we need to, as I say, look at this thing holistically, work with the trade, because the trade needs to trade responsibly. But a simple prohibition on them trading is not going to have the desired effect, I'm afraid.
Adrian Buerto, thanks very much for talking to us this evening. A reminder of our headline stories at this hour. As the police commissioner comes under fire for the Marikana massacre, the police minister faces a community enraged by brutality. Economists warn that the rand could get worse before it improves. And Catholics hope their new pope will usher in a new era for the embattled church.
A very good afternoon to you. Leading business, South Africa's mining sector seems to be making a comeback. Data released by Stats SA for January has come in much higher than expected, with production increasing by more than 7% on an annual basis. It is the first time that mining production has increased since September last year, and of course it follows a decline in production of nearly 9% in December and an overall decline of 3.1% for last year. Manufacturing production has also come in better than expected. From last January to this January, it increased by nearly 4%. This was due to higher production of petroleum products, chemical products, cars and food and beverages. Let's take a quick look at the markets. The JSE closing a touch higher, the rand recovering somewhat after plunging and languishing at 4-year lows for the last few days. The old share up only a small fraction among industrials. Some of the retail